Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 13th of June, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So kicking off today, we have a little bit of, I don't know if I'd call it drama, but something funny that was that came out of the last 24 hours. So basically, we all know that I think a few weeks ago, Trump said that he was going to start accepting crypto donations, and he has since done that. And now Biden apparently is looking to accept crypto donations as well. Now, of course, we know they do this because, hey, it's an easy kind of, I guess, like big money market to target if they wanted to get donations. And I think that, I don't know how much money people have sent Trump so far, but I'm sure he's been donated a bunch of money there, and Biden also wants a piece of that pie, obviously, which is hilarious because I put this tweet out where I basically said Biden wants to accept crypto donations, yet his SEC buddies are suing the biggest US-based crypto companies such as Coinbase, Kraken, and Uniswap Labs, so it's a clown world. And then Quit here in my replies said that even better, he wants to use one of the companies being sued, Coinbase, as a means to do it. So it's just very hypocritical, and this is like one of the main reasons I hate politics, because there's just so much crap in politics. You guys know I love my kind of reality over narratives, but politics is like 99% narrative. It's all about how much shit you can talk, really, and it's all about how many people you can fool into believing your promises, and when you actually get into power, you don't tend to fulfill most of those promises, and you pivot and so on and so forth for various different reasons. Obviously, politics is quite complicated, but this is my number one reason for hating it, is because it just falls into the realm of narrative far too much, and it's just really hypocritical for Biden to basically, or the Biden campaign to basically say that they want to accept crypto donations when they're, the SEC with Gary Gensler as the chair, which was who is a Democrat and who was appointed by Biden, going after the biggest US companies with baseless lawsuits. I wouldn't have an issue with it if there were lawsuits that actually made any kind of sense, but they're completely baseless, right? They don't really have any base in reality. They come after Coinbase, especially, has tried to play ball with the regulators for years now, and they also come in a time where TradFi is actually adopting crypto as well. So there's this, I guess, push and pull going on right now within the crypto regulatory landscape. We've seen a lot of stuff's changed over the last few weeks, especially, but this is just another thing that I actually would consider to be a positive move, I should say, because of the fact that if the Biden campaign is being, I guess, like even a little bit more open to crypto, it's better than what they've been in the past. Even if they're only just doing it to get donations, even if they're only like LARPing about it and only just doing it as a talking point, it's still better than what we've had in the past, I believe. And as I said before, I think that there's no anti-crypto vote, but there is a big pro-crypto vote. And I don't know if people are going to change their vote materially based on it. Like, enough people are going to change their vote materially based on whether a party is pro-crypto or not. But there is, I guess, like a crowd that will change it based on how anti-crypto a party is. So, as I said, there's no vote where people will basically, well, at least I believe there's no vote where there's enough people that would move the needle that, that hate crypto, that would vote for the anti-crypto party. But I believe that a party being so far to one side and being anti-crypto will cause people to not vote for them and vote for the other candidate. I mean, it doesn't even matter if the other candidate wasn't pro-crypto. Like, Trump could say nothing about crypto and would still probably get the votes from people who were fed up with the Democrats being anti-crypto, right? So there's that kind of thing at play there, and the election's drawing closer and closer, guys. Not too far away now; it's in November, so we're getting closer and closer here. But I think that maybe the Biden campaign wants to do a calculated move here, where they're like, okay, well, how many people are staunch Democrats that are being forced to vote for the Republicans in this election because they've been so anti-crypto? All right, let's pretend, even if they're pretending or not, let's say that we're pro-crypto, and let's see if that moves the needle. So, as I said, a lot of political games going on here, but just something that I figured I'd point out because the hypocrisy is just crazy to me. And the fact that the SEC is still getting away with everything pretty much, and Gary Gensler is still at the helm, is insane to me. Like, in any other industry, if someone as in a leadership position, in like an executive position at a private company, if they were doing the shit that Gary Gensler has been doing, they would have been fired a long time ago. The board would have gotten rid of them. But because it's all politics when it comes to these regulatory agencies, Gensler is still in power. He has completely failed in his duty to protect investors. I don't think he's protected anyone from anything, honestly. Him and the SEC at large. I think they've done irreparable damage to much of not just the crypto industry, but also outside of that as well, and only protected themselves. I mean, there was another thing that came out today that apparently Terraform Labs, the main company behind the Terra ecosystem, has agreed to pay the SEC $4.4 billion worth of fines. Okay, for starters, why do they have $4.4 billion to begin with? Like, that's insane. They still have that much money. Secondly, why are they paying the SEC that? Shouldn't the SEC be mandating that a lot of that money, or if not all of it, go towards the victims of the Terra Ponzi, of what happened with Terra? But no, they basically act like a mafia that goes around, suing, or I guess going after different players and forcing them to pay protection money, or I guess like a fine, right, in order to be left alone. And this has happened plenty of times in the past within crypto. I mean, famously, the Block One, the people, or I guess like the company that created EOS and ran the year-long EOS ICO, where they raised over $4 billion, only had to pay a $24 million fine to the SEC for conducting an unregistered securities sale, and then they didn't have to admit that EOS was a security, and they just settled, and that was it. The whole case was settled for $24 million when you raised over $4 billion. It's just insane, right? Like, the SEC got its cut and then was like, okay, whatever, go on and do your go and do your merry business. And as we all know, EOS went nowhere. Block One completely abandoned it and rode off into the sunset, traded all that ETH that they raised in the ICO for BTC, and now they're one of the largest holders of BTC, essentially enjoying their ill-gotten gains and being billionaires in the process. It's just insane to me. It really, really is. But yeah, anyway, enough ranting about that one. Moving on to some tech-related news here. So I saw this ETH research post from Parathosh that I thought was quite interesting. So as you guys know, a current roadmap item for Ethereum is to expire the state of Ethereum and then have it served via third-party means, kind of like what we have right now with the expiration of blobs. How blobs expire every 18 days, and if you want to access them past that, then someone has to store them. I'm storing blobs on my home servers, as you guys know, but there are a lot of third parties storing these, and because it's based on a one-of-n trust assumption, you essentially only need one copy of that data, and you match the kind of hash with what's on chain, the commitment hash with what's on chain, and you know that it hasn't been changed, you know that it's true, and then you can propagate it out from there. So it's a really cool little primitive that we've got going there. Now, of course, we want to expand that to the rest of the network. We want to expand that to the rest of the state, and that's exactly what things like EIP quadruple 4 try to do, and essentially that is on the roadmap. It has been on the roadmap for quite a while here, and something called the Portal Network has been on the roadmap as well. I've talked about that in the past, but Parathosh's tweet, it's not tweet, sorry, his research post basically talks about serving the state over torrents and over torrenting software. So for those of you who may not be aware, torrents are not just exclusive to to piracy, to media, to downloading movies and TV shows and music and all that. Torrenting is just like a protocol, right? BitTorrent is a protocol. There is a BitTorrent client that Justin Sun now owns, I believe, but BitTorrent is a protocol for sharing data across the internet, peer-to-peer sharing across the internet. Now, because of that, we could use and piggyback off of BitTorrent here in order to serve state, in order to serve expired state to anyone who would want to download it here, instead of having it kept on online on the network. And an easy way to, I guess, like imagine this is that the Ethereum network is like BitTorrent in that it is a peer-to-peer network where data is kept in sync and is shared, and you have to come to consensus on that. But the problem with that is that the more the chain grows and the more the state grows, the harder it is for the network to keep up, the harder it is on the nodes, and the overall more kind of like, I guess, I wouldn't call it like waste data or anything like that, but the harder it is to basically sync all of that data, because the chain just grows and grows and grows from there, and then no one can sync full nodes and archive nodes in the logical conclusion here, and you lose the, I guess, like the top feature of a blockchain, which is the ability to verify it on consumer hardware, or at least the layer 1 blockchain here. So you can go give this post a read for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but really, it's a really cool way to, I guess, fix the issue of data availability when it comes to state expiry outside of kind of the Portal network. And I think that if we were to implement this at scale, and we were to even incentivize it in some way, I don't know how you would incentivize it, but in some way it would work really, really well. But you can go give this a read for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But also, there may be someone notes here in the comments that there may be no way to incentivize or ensure that the data is served by peers, because incentives are weird here. Like, you probably couldn't incentivize it from like an in protocol perspective. You wouldn't be able to pay ETH out to people for to do this, because It could be gamed. There's no objective way to see this, but there are like extra protocol incentives you could use. I don't know what form that would come in. Maybe there's like a state expiry guild or like a data guild, which essentially is similar to a protocol guild, where it's a public goods thing that essentially pays out, is stewarded by some group of trusted people, and then pays out some money to people to keep this data alive. I don't think we're going to need that. I think the incentive of just like having it there and being able to serve it and monetize that data is the same as it is for blobs. Because with blobs right now, as I mentioned, like I'm storing it as a hobby thing, and there's a lot of people who would store this as a hobby thing as well. But there are other companies storing blobs for long-term retrieval of these blobs in order to I guess like do data analytics on it and monetize those products to allow people to look up things for tax-related purposes and monetize that. So there are various different reasons as to why people would store this without direct incentives, and I think that's fine to rely on those sorts of things. And also expiring the state would be done, as from the latest kind of things that I've seen, it would be done on state that hasn't been accessed for a certain period of time. I think it's a year the last time I looked at that. So if the state hasn't been touched on chain in a year, the safe assumption is that it is something that no one cares about anymore. So let's expire it. And if people do care about it, they would be storing the state for themselves, on their own full nodes. Just like with blobs, if you did care about retrieving blob data past 18 days or retrieving the blobs past 18-day expiry window, then you would just store it yourself if it really mattered that much to you, right? So I think that's a happy middle ground in order to tackle the issue of state growth over time, because for Ethereum, it definitely is a big issue and something that we need to keep focused on in order to rectify over the next few years. All right, so Vance Spencer put out an interesting tweet today, which I think really encapsulates one of Ethereum's superpowers over pretty much every other network. So because of Ethereum's rollup centric roadmap, Vance says here, we're going to see a lot more corporate L2s like Base on Ethereum. Fortune 500 companies are taking note of the $30 to $40 million of revenue per month Base is doing, the new business model that they've pioneered, and how they've cut out the payments middleman. There will be many more Ethereum. So as I said, this is unique to Ethereum, because Ethereum is the only a layer one that I know of that has any usage. Like there are maybe other layer ones out there, but they've probably got no usage or are rather irrelevant. I should say the only relevant layer one, the only one that has a lot of activity on it, that is pursuing the rollup centric roadmap, and that is getting people to build their rollups on Ethereum instead of building them elsewhere. Now, because of this and because of this uniqueness to Ethereum, it basically means that ETH as an asset essentially benefits from all of this. So anytime a new L2 is spun up, even if they're not using ETH as like the default gas fee on the L2, they're still tapping into the ETH liquidity, into the ETH the asset, because they're living on top of Ethereum. It's very easy to bridge in from Ethereum, and they get access to a massive, $400+ billion asset pool of capital, and there is a culture of people using their ETH on chain. Whereas if for something like Bitcoin, if you were to do, I don't know if it's possible someday to do rollups on Bitcoin, there is a very small percentage of, I guess, on-chain BTC users. Most BTC users are happy just holding it off-chain and never touching it, right? But there's a very small percentage that would use it on-chain, whereas on Ethereum, it's the other way around. There's a huge percentage of ETH that wants to be put to work, that wants to be used, even outside of staking, right? Because the staking has a lot of ETH locked up, and then there's a lot of ETH on-chain doing other things, whether it's DeFi, whether it's using ETH as money for NFTs or doing payments, stuff like that, minting stablecoins, all those sorts of things, right? So there's a lot of stuff to do with your ETH here, which is, and because of these other corporate L2s that are probably going to come online, as I've speculated on before, I think that there's going to be a new stock exchange built on top of Ethereum, a fully tokenized stock exchange that is fully regulated in the real world, but everything is a token first and it's all on chain. Like, what better way to build that than as an L2 on top of Ethereum, instead of building a new L1, which is just, infinitely harder than building an L2, and just way more expensive. And also you would just be building it as an EVM L1 anyway, because you'd want to tap into all the existing token standards, all the existing infrastructure, whether that be wallets or otherwise, all the existing developers, right? So the path of least resistance and the path of greatest success chances for something like an on-chain tokenized stock exchange would be as an L2. And could you imagine BlackRock and friends banding together to build this thing as an L2 on Ethereum? Imagine how bullish that would be, not just for ETH as an asset, but for the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole. That would basically be, I guess, probably the most bullish thing to happen to Ethereum ever, really, because it fulfills a bunch of different goals here. The first goal that it would fulfill Refuel is the goal of making a better alternative financial system that integrates with the existing financial system. That's the biggest goal there. Secondly, would be basically completely proving out the L2 thesis and completely proving out what Vance is saying here, that this is a new business model that's been unlocked that people, whether they're small companies or big companies, want to tap into. And thirdly, it basically cements ETH as the internet native money, and nothing else would really come close in that arena, I think, because it's now blending in from the real world, taking all of this capital in from the real world on chain, and ultimately it settles down to ETH. Because as I said, even if the L2 is not using ETH as a gas fee, it would still be using ETH as a kind of collateral asset there, as a money on there. And then ultimately that L2 would be settling down to Ethereum. So ultimately it will be paying ETH fees to the base layer, and then that would be being burned. So it just creates a very, very nice little, not even just like a narrative, but like a reality for ETH and Ethereum as an asset and as a network there, which would be, yeah, as I said, like incredibly bullish there. So just something to think about. I'm curious to see what happens, because not all of these will be successful, as I've said before, but I think that if it's BlackRock and other TradFi firms doing this and doing it well, executing on it well, it would have great success. Because what would be better? So what would be better than the current stock market, the way it exists today, would be a global on-chain 24/7 tokenized stock market that can be plugged into the existing on-chain economy that is hyper efficient. You no longer need to wait long times for settlement. You can do settlement pretty much like as fast as you want, right? It would be much, much cheaper than what they have today and what they're doing today. It would be interoperable between different countries. It would be a huge boon for stablecoins, not just ETH and Ethereum, for US dollar stablecoins. It would be a huge boon for the US dollar generally, which some people speculate lately that is going to lose its strength because it may lose its status as a reserve currency due to basically people abandoning the petrodollar, which I think is happening right now. So it would be a way for the US to combat that, and then essentially you would have an explosion in stablecoins, both US dollar and other fiat currencies on chain as well, and it would just be so much better than the existing system we have today. That's the end game. That's one of the end games for Ethereum, which would be really cool. Now, would this L2 be decentralized? Probably not, right? Does it need to be? Probably not, because it's not trying to do something decentralized, right? It's trying to do something in a much more efficient and effective way than is already being done, but that something is a centralized use case by nature. Like, it's not a stock exchange is centralized by nature. Something that is typing into real world assets has to be centralized by nature, because if you're trading, for example, a tokenized representation of gold on chain, you don't trade the gold as a digitally native asset. The gold is in a vault somewhere, and all you're trading on chain is an IOU, and you rely on a centralized intermediary there, or a centralized counterparty, to make sure that gold is in the vault. It's the same as what happens today when you're trading gold on the stock market. Generally, you're trading IOUs. You're not trading the actual gold, right? The physical gold is not moving. Whereas with digital assets, they're digital first. Like, ETH is issued by the Ethereum network. There's no physical ETH, so all of the stuff happens on chain. It's settled on chain, and all the guarantees are on chain. Whereas the ultimate settlement for these other things would be still done off chain, but the tokenized representations of them is what unlocks the new use cases, the 24/7 trading, the better efficiency, and so on and so forth there. So yeah, anyway, thanks to Vance for putting this tweet out. Got me thinking today, got the juices flowing there, and I'm super excited to see how this plays out over the long term. All right, so Polygon has announced today that the Polygon community began discussing a proposal that would see the Polygon PoS chain connected to the AggLayer. This is ZK PoS Phase 1, and if accepted, the pool of unified liquidity for chains connected to the AggLayer would grow by $2 billion. Now, as you guys know, Polygon 2.0 is this huge effort from Polygon that was announced probably a year ago now, I think, that essentially has the goal of moving Polygon towards being a fully kind of like ZK endgame ecosystem. Now, I think there were three main parts of this. There was the governance part of it, which they've been doing a lot of work on. There was the Matic to Pol token migration, which I believe is coming soon, and then using and upgrading the token altogether to be basically a native restaking token within the ecosystem. And then thirdly was transitioning the existing proof of stake chain into a ZK Validium on top of Ethereum here. Now, this is being done in phases. Phase 1 is essentially to connect the PoS chain to the AggLayer, which is this other piece of infrastructure that they're building as a public good to unify liquidity on Ethereum. Now, the reason why I think this is really cool is because the PoS chain already has a large user base and already has a large set of liquidity. And what that means is that because the PoS chain has $2 billion of liquidity on there and immediately plugging it into the AggLayer, it incentivizes the other L2s and the other L1s to plug into the AggLayer. So it starts that flywheel effect. You don't have a chicken and egg issue here. They don't need to use token incentives to do this. All they need to do is plug in their existing liquidity into this new AggLayer, and all of a sudden there is $2 billion there for everyone else to tap into if they want to, and they're incentivized to do that. So I think that that's going to be a really nice way to get the AggLayer flywheel started, because as I've said before, the AggLayer is not a Polygon thing. It is a public good, but that Polygon is building, and it's trying to be a credibly neutral, unified liquidity layer. But the issue is not the issue, but like I guess the main barrier is that it's opt-in. No one, no one's forced to use it. But the more chains that do use it, the better it is overall for everyone, and the more I guess like network effect it has, and the more the users will demand that their favorite chain plugs into it, and then it basically becomes a flywheel effect from there. And eventually you'll see, a lot of liquidity on the AggLayer, which will be really, really great for users. So I'm not sure when the next phase of the ZK PoS transition will be, like when it's going to be a full ZK Validium. I would say at this stage it's probably going to be maybe next year, because it is a pretty big ask. It basically is like a merge for Polygon. We're essentially transitioning the PoS chain on the fly to a ZK Validium without interrupting anything for users, without losing any funds or anything like that, without anything going wrong, is a pretty big ask here, and they want to do it in phases, of course. So I believe that will probably happen sometime early next year. Like that's kind of my estimation on that there. But you can go check out this thread about what they announced today. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so here's a project that I probably don't know if I've talked about on the Refuel before, but this is a very old project in the Ethereum space, and the project is called Foam, F-O-A-M. So this is an old project from all the way back in 2017, and a fun story about this is that this is one of the projects that I was pretty bullish on back in 2017. I invested in the ICO in 2017, and I also went to a local meetup in Melbourne here in 2017 about Foam. Now, what Foam is trying to build is essentially, well, initially they were trying to build this kind of off-grid network of like, I guess like real world physical infrastructure, node infrastructure, kind of what's known as like DePIN today, right? And Foam was doing it before it was cool. They've pivoted a bunch of times, but now they've basically settled on being a radio kind of network, off-grid radio network, built on Ethereum, built on the OP stack here. And what they've announced today is basically the ability to do Ethereum transactions over radio frequencies here, which is really cool. I mean, I think that I've said before that I'm generally quite bearish on DePIN, because a lot of these things tend to centralize over time, in that because of economies of scale, when you put economic incentives into it, it'll just centralize and everything will become basically what we have today with centralized infrastructure. And decentralizing out infrastructure is incredibly hard to begin with, because it's physical, right? You have to physically go out there and install these things, and it is a long-term thing. But as I said, Foam's been at this for 7 years now, and essentially it's more of a kind of like hobbyist thing, I think, for people to set up these things. It happens outside of crypto as well. There is a whole community that does LoRaWAN, which is a hobbyist thing where they set up these nodes and they communicate with each other. It's like the ham radio enthusiasts, right? Like it's the same thing, where it's basically a very nerdy enthusiast thing. But that's the way to do it, in my opinion. Adding, strong economic incentives on top of it can work to kind of get things going, but then you have to prevent it from turning into a centralization game, which is very, very difficult to do. So I just wanted to highlight this for you guys, something different, something that I haven't really talked about before, but this is the kind of stuff that I guess like makes Ethereum even more World War III resistant, where essentially you have these ways to send transactions on the network over radio frequencies instead of over the internet, right? So if the internet was to go down for some reason, or the internet going down, what does that even look like, right? But if you weren't able to kind of get access to the internet here, but you could still access radio, and people were running full nodes on this network, then you could essentially get transactions included. Now, I guess like this is a huge thing, right? This is not something that's going to happen like overnight. This is not something that's going to happen anytime soon. And physical infrastructure rolling it out takes a while, but still, it's something different, something cool, something that an old Ethereum project is still working on, which I thought was worth highlighting here. But you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, last up here, I just wanted to show this chart that was shared by Mario on Twitter today. So he said, what an unbelievable stat. According to a recent report by Chainalysis, 4% of Turkey's GDP is going to stablecoin purchases. Turkey is among the top 20 economies globally by GDP. So the reason why I wanted to highlight this was not because I thought that this was like cool or thought this was a good thing, because obviously people in Turkey are fleeing to US dollar stablecoins because their currency is being devalued due to inflation or hyperinflation. But the reason why I think it is I guess like a valuable thing to highlight is because without stablecoins in the past, what would have to happen is that people would be going into US dollars in a very centralized way, whether that's through like some offshore bank account or more likely through cash. And as we know, cash is very, very insecure because you got to carry the cash around, you got to secure it yourself. You can't be putting it into a bank because there's a high risk of seizure in these countries. So what I guess crypto has done, it has enabled these people to essentially go into US dollar stablecoins like USDT, like USDC, where yes, they are centralized, but there's probably way less of a risk holding those things than there is holding USD cash or holding USD in a bank account in their local country here, or even in an offshore account where it can get seized if they do an audit and say, okay, well, this account is being and it was opened by like someone in Turkey, it's not opened by someone that we want to do business with, so on and so forth, right? So this just speaks to, I guess, like the wider trend of stablecoin adoption as well. People don't really like to talk about stablecoins too much because you can't speculate on them, right? You could buy a stablecoin for $1, but you can't be like, oh, I can't wait for it to go to $2 and I'll double my money. No. And stablecoins generally are considered quite boring, but stablecoins and payments are the biggest use case of crypto today. Stablecoins is the biggest use case of crypto today, and it really does speak to the fact that they've reached product market fit, even if they're centralized. And that's because of the original goal of crypto, of basically to give people a way to escape fiat currencies, to escape hyperinflation. And this has not just been happening in Turkey, it's been happening in Argentina a lot as well. There's a lot of Argentinians in crypto, but in other places around the world as well. So you can go into US dollar stablecoins, or you can go into ETH and BTC to get out of the inflation here. Like I personally, I don't know what I'd be like in these countries. Obviously you need US dollars and need a relatively stable currency for everyday purchases, but as a store of value, I would definitely be purchasing, ETH in these countries as a store of value here, or even BTC. I do that in Australia, and AUD isn't hyperinflating at all, right? And I do that here. That's what I want to store my value in. So I'm sure that they're doing that as well. But in terms of having something that is relatively stable compared to what you are used to, right, in your own native currency here, on your own native fiat currency, and something that you want to use for payments, stablecoins, specifically US dollar stablecoins, are very, very important here and very, very important for helping these people to escape hyperinflation. So you can go check out this chart for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But yeah, just always keep in mind that stablecoins are the number one use case of crypto and number one product market fit of crypto today, probably going to be that into the future. What do stablecoins look like in 10, 20 years? Are we just stuck on the US dollar, or can we create better stablecoins that aren't pegged to fiat? Remains to be seen. I think we can, but there's a lot of experimentation that needs to take place. There's a lot of adoption that still needs to take place in order to provide enough liquidity for these things to work, and so on and so forth. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.